question from Simon. What can you tell us about human trafficking cover-ups by military and the government?
The documented gap is this. The US government has a zero-tolerance policy on trafficking, but from 2017 to 2021, the military responded to 176 reported instances of labor trafficking involving over 900 workers. Not a single contractor has been prosecuted or permanently debarred in over a decade, despite substantiated violations. The Government Accountability Office found that contracting officers weren't even entering violations into federal databases. So companies with substantiated trafficking violations kept receiving billions in new government contracts because the Pentagon didn't flag them. For 6 years, military officials didn't flag a single firm. That's systemic concealment. Beyond that, investigators for the Army and Pentagon's Office of Inspector General weren't reporting their own trafficking investigations as required by law, meaning Congress wasn't getting the full picture either. When investigations do happen, military officials don't share results with each other or other agencies, so contracting officers throughout government don't know they're hiring companies with trafficking records. An NBC News analysis found at least 10 companies with substantiated trafficking violations since 2007 have continued receiving billions in new government contracts. The through line is deliberate institutional blindness protecting defense contractors worth billions in revenue.
Wow. What about child and sex trafficking?
The most documented cases involve military personnel and bases. Since 2021 and the withdrawal from Afghanistan, dozens of elite soldiers stationed at Fort Bragg have been convicted of raping children, distributing child pornography, and related offenses. There's also a documented case of a 14-year-old Indigenous girl found on a Marine Corps base in San Diego, where her family alleged a cover-up of sex trafficking. Army civilian employees and contractors have been documented sexually abusing children on military bases overseas. There are also reports about how US military presence in Afghanistan created conditions enabling mass child exploitation. The connection here is that military installations and personnel themselves have been directly involved in child sex trafficking, and like the labor trafficking cases, accountability has been minimal. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern where military and government institutions have failed to prosecute or hold personnel accountable despite documented evidence.
Wow. What about Canada and the UK?
Canada currently has a significant legal gap. The Defense Department cannot suspend or debar contractors from receiving new government contracts based on allegations of human trafficking, fraud, or environmental violations. They can only take action if there's a criminal conviction. That means a contractor credibly accused of trafficking workers can still bid on and win new defense contracts while investigations are ongoing. Canada just announced changes to fix this, but under the current system, there's a massive loophole. There are also documented cases of Canadian peacekeepers being involved in sexual exploitation and abuse abroad. For the UK, Britain is the world centre for private military contractors, yet it's almost impossible to find out what they're actually doing. The UK Foreign Office continues to deploy contractors to places where it has itself condemned human rights violations. There's minimal transparency and oversight of what these contractors are engaged in overseas. The historical case of Catherine Bolkovac's exposed sex trafficking involving military contractors in Bosnia in the 90s. But systemic accountability gaps persist.
Okay, and can you go a little bit deeper into the child and sex trafficking in Canada, please?
Let me search for that specific information on Canada. Based on documented cases, Canadian peacekeepers have been involved in sexual exploitation and abuse of children in UN peacekeeping operations, particularly in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Kosovo. As early as 2004, Amnesty International reported that underage girls were being kidnapped, tortured, and forced into prostitution in Kosovo with UN and NATO personnel, including Canadian forces, driving demand. There's also a critical legal gap. Canadian law can't punish some peacekeepers for sex misconduct committed abroad unless it constitutes a war crime or involves a minor.
Wow. And the UK?
Let me search for specifics on UK military and child sex trafficking. The UK has documented widespread child sexual abuse within the military. Since 2021, the service police have recorded 128 cases of sexual offences where the victim was under 18, with 113 of those victims being serving personnel and 15 being civilians. In 2021 alone, 37 girls across the British Armed Forces were victims of sexual offences, with 4 cases being rape. Girls serving in the armed forces were 10 times more likely than adult female personnel to be victims of sexual offences. There's also documented abuse within military training institutions, like the Army Foundation College, where instructors were convicted of serial sexual exploitation of female under 18 recruits. Between 2010 and 2024, there were 944 court-martials for sexual offences, with 155 involving charges of sexual crimes against children. The UK government has paid out £8 million to survivors of child sexual abuse by British troops since 2017, with an average of £52,000 per survivor. Importantly, there's evidence of cover-up culture. Military police have mishandled cases of child abuse by soldiers, and investigations into historic abuse have been closed with victims told there wasn't enough evidence to proceed.
Okay, we'll end that there. Thank you very much for that horrifying information.
The more people that are aware of the corruption and trafficking cover-ups within military and government, the better we can demand accountability and protect the vulnerable.
The better we can stop voting and paying taxes and paying for this stuff.